something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories.
We're back. Happy Valentine's Day. We're back. We haven't been on the air in 3 years. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Our goal is to educate you about the criminal justice system in Harris County, which really is all over the world and all over the country. It's all the same. And there's so many great organizations out there now trying to help the formerly incarcerated or those who are incarcerated when they come out, and to give support to their children and to their families. I have in the studio with me tonight my co-host, Damion Walker.
Yes, happy to be back.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here too. And our guest tonight is LaKeidra Blaylock. So LaKeidra, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Tell us about your organization, Breaking Chains and Making Amends.
So Breaking Chains, Making Amends, also known as BCMA, was started on the John Wynn unit in 2012.
Hold on, go slower. The John Wynn unit of TDC.
Yes.
In the prison system.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, tell me
Within
about
the
that.
prison system, my father, Warden Pittman, he was the warden there at the time, and he wanted to give some programming to what they called medium custody guys, the guys who were on medium custody, because they couldn't have any programming. Mm-hmm. So he went to them and he said, what can I do to help you? And they came up with all of these great ideas, and Giving Back was one of them. They came up with the name, the mission statement, and our first scholarship recipient was funded by the guys who were on the Wynn unit. They donated from their inmate trust fund every single month.
Wow.
Yes, so
let me make sure I understand.
Okay.
So what's medium custody?
So medium custody are guys who are considered at that time G4, meaning that they are not in population. They're basically on lockdown, most of the time 23 hours a day, because they're having behavior problems. Mm-hmm. So they're having all these behavior problems, so they are not with general population. But my dad understood that when you even segregate them, it doesn't make the issue any better.
Let me make sure I understand. So in medium custody, there are problems in the prison, but does it have anything to do with the crime that they are in prison for?
No, ma'am. The disciplinaries that they receive while they're in prison, they could be bringing in contraband, it could be fighting, it could be assault against some of the correctional staff. Okay. And so they are put in medium custody. But when he began to implement that program, it gave the men hope. And so they began to just decide that they wanted to start giving back. And once they started doing something productive, the assaults on the officers, it went down. People were denouncing their gangs. The gang affiliation decreased. Family members started coming back together because they saw a change in their family on the inside.
Wow.
Yeah, and
so this program was an in-prison program, but it benefited the participant in prison, but also their family members outside of prison.
Right. So
wow.
they started it on the Wynn unit, and they wanted to give back. So what the basic foundation was that they would give scholarships to the children and grandchildren of the person that was incarcerated or the victim of the crime. So the very first scholarship recipient, she witnessed her mother being murdered by her boyfriend. And so they selected the recipient, and she graduated from Sam Houston University, first generation college graduate.
Wow.
And they funded it from every month. Every month they would send in their donation to BCMA from their inmate trust fund.
Wow.
Yes. Our very first scholarship recipient has been in prison for almost 45 years. Every month he sends his $50 like he's paying a bill.
Wow.
Yes. It's an amazing program. It really is.
Wow, that is amazing. Is that program still in existence?
Absolutely. So we actually, and we've expanded it. So now we not only do the scholarships, but we also have mentorship. And the mentorship program is only comprised of people who've been formerly incarcerated. So they go back in and mentor the men and women that are incarcerated, and they don't have to be on their way out. They could have one of our mentees have a life sentence, but it helps them to navigate that space and to do the time. And then we have the reentry piece where we connect with organizations, where we provide them with reentry referrals and resources to help them navigate when they're transitioning back into society. And we also help the families, because a lot of times people will come from prison into a situation that's already, there's trauma there. So we try to assist the families as well, because we don't want them to recidivate. And a lot of times it's the pressure that's going on at home that will cause them to recidivate. So we try to help the families as well. So we provide them with resources.
Wow. So Damion, tell us how you got involved with LaKeidra in this fantastic program.
Okay, so I got involved, and let me backtrack a little bit
Sure, of
about
course.
medium custody. I was on medium custody. I didn't have a bunch of behavioral issues.
Yeah, but
I
you went
did.
in for as a juvenile.
As a
though.
juvenile, so
Talk about for those who've never heard your story. Just give us a little brief synopsis of how you went to prison.
So I was incarcerated at the age of 16 for 4 aggravated robberies that I didn't do and a burglary of a habitation that I did. Ended up pleading guilty, pleading out in 1994 after I was certified. And I was incarcerated for 17 years. And in that 17 years, I was at a John B. Conley unit, a kind of like tough unit. And I went to medium custody for catching a couple major cases, but the one I went for was actually refusing to go to work. So I went and I stayed on medium custody for 7 months, and it was actually like that. It was locked down, a lot of behavior issues, and you kept going to close custody or SEG after that. But I spent about 7 to 8 months on medium custody. And I came into contact with LaKeidra. I think you reached out to me. Was that how we got in contact?
I think so.
Yeah, because I was doing some work, and I think she heard my name.
In jail?
No, in Houston. In
okay,
Houston. I was already out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was already out.
Well, let's talk about when you were in medium custody. Did they have that program when you were there?
Oh, no.
No, that was before.
Yeah, this was 96.
What were your years in prison? I forgot.
From 1993 to 2010. Yeah, so no, there was no programs like that. It was just continue to be violent and continue to go down the hole. You had to pull yourself out. There was no really help or anything like that, unless the individuals that were there, the offenders that were there, they would mentor and they would be like, hey man, it's time for you to calm down. Or you would just realize, hey, it's time for me to calm down because I'm just keep going down this hole, because there was no stopping. There was no stopping. You had to some sort of way find a way out or just say, man, I just can't do it anymore. And that was mine. When I went to medium custody, I ended up getting in a lot more trouble, and I was about to go,
Wow.
And I was about to go to closed custody. And when I went over there, being so young and still so small, I saw the men that were over there, and they were a different breed of person. And I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen if I come over here. I'm gonna go deeper than probably I ever want to go. So let me kind of get it together, and then I went back to minimum custody. That was up. I went back to minimum custody after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get to how you met LaKeidra.
Yeah, so we ended up contacting, and really, I don't even remember what it was, but we ended up contacting, and she immediately started telling me my value. That's the main thing I remember, because I didn't understand my value that I had to the justice system, those that are systematically impacted, the reentry system, because I had been helping organizations build their own organizations with the knowledge that I have and the work that I was doing and education from U of H. And some sort of way she found me, and we started talking, and she just was telling me about this other world where we had value, not just telling our story and not getting paid for it or not just being used by organizations. And when that happened, that's when I started building my programs and started doing my nonprofit a couple years later. But that was the main thing. So she's spoken to me about the value that I had for the community that I came from.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So LaKeidra, if you recall, how did you, I guess, find the words to explain to him his value? Tell me about that, and tell me, what you told him.
I think one of the things for me was when I heard him speak, and I would go to all of these meetings, and I would always hear them mention his name. And when I talked to him, I told him, I said, people need you. They're looking for you.
Right.
And you're more than just an employee. You're more than just a worker. You are valuable, not just to the organizations, but to the justice impacted community. And we need you, basically, because I need you, because I have 2 young boys. They haven't been justice impacted yet, or they won't be justice impacted, not yet.
Hopefully never.
Yeah, just as impacted, but they need to see you. They need the value that you have in your mouth to keep them from going that way. And the men that have been just as impacted, they need to see that you can come out and you can make it and you can be successful and you don't have to allow people to use you. And he would listen, but I think he finally got it, and the light came on, because Damion has a lot to offer.
He does.
And I wanted him to know that it's not just about you giving it away, but it's about people understanding that you're valuable, and everything that you have to offer to the community, we need it. If we want to really break down the cycle of recidivism and mass incarceration, you have a voice that corporations need to hear. You don't have to just keep preaching to the choir. And so he listened, and now he has cognitive justice, and I'm really proud of him.
Oh, great, great. It's good for you to mentor people. I know you're proud of him. When I first heard him speak, I felt the same way. That's why I wanted him to co-host with me and share his experience. 17 years of lockdown will really break a person's spirit, especially going in as a child. And so for somebody to be strong enough mentally and intelligent enough to, find that intelligence for all those years that he lost, to do something positive, I've tried to encourage him where I can too. So I'm proud of him. I'm very proud of you, Damion.
Thank you so much.
Keep up the good work.
I will.
Keep forward, not backwards. Can't go back. You know what back has. Back
There's
is
no
nothing.
such thing as back.
Yeah, you got it.
No reverse over here.
No reverse.
No.
And so tell me what got you interested in this community. Have you had someone in your family impacted by the criminal justice system?
Yes, well, my biological father probably spent 30 years of my life in and out of incarceration.
Oh, wow.
So my very first visit was, he was on the Darrington unit. I was 9 years old. All I know is that I was going to see my dad. His mom came and picked me up. And I remember I was raised by my great-grandparents. And I remember
On your mom or dad's side?
My mom's side. Okay. And I remember my great-grandfather being really angry because I was going. But no one had that conversation with me about why he was in prison, why they were angry, and what was going to happen. And when I got there, he wanted me to be a part of his life, but I just didn't have the words as a 9-year-old to articulate what I was seeing, what I was feeling. The prison, you had the guards searching you, you had the cement walls, the floors. It was a lot for a 9-year-old. And I began to internalize a lot of rejection, abandonment, depression, suicide as a result of that, because I just felt like, why couldn't my dad be here for me like everyone else's father? And I didn't realize that it was his addiction, not his lack of love for me. But I equated his lack of love was the reason he couldn't stay out of prison. And so I think I was 25 when I finally got it. When I finally realized him being incarcerated had nothing to do with me or who I was. But no one had those conversations with children. And no one told them that you can, but the thing is, I still wanted to love my dad. But I didn't feel like it was okay because the people around me were so angry with him. And so I felt if I loved him, it was almost like I was betraying the people who were caring for me. And so I was 25 years old. He was out of prison. I let him come live with me. And I got up one night and he was gone and my car was gone. So he had relapsed. Went into the crack house. I got him. I got my car, and he told me he wanted to stay. And
stay at the crack house?
Yes. And at that moment, I think I realized this is not even about me.
Right.
I was making it my responsibility to keep him sober. I was making it my responsibility to keep him out of prison, all because no one told me that it wasn't my responsibility, and no one told me that I had my own journey and that the journey that he chose had nothing to do with me. And so I realized if I felt that way and I was 25, I'm sure there were a lot of kids who felt that way. And so I wanted to give back to those children. And I wanted to communicate to the caregivers that don't make the child feel like they're betraying you because they still want to love their parent. Because even though my dad was on crack, he was still my father.
Right.
And I look just like him. I smile just like him. So if you're saying he is worthless,
Then that means you're worthless.
Right.
And you can't have that.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
At 25, I mean, I think if kids are fortunate enough to have counseling, counselors will tell them that they're important
Right.
and that their father loves them, but it's the addiction that is
Right.
stronger than the
Right.
love. But even as a child, you still don't understand that.
No.
Because you want to feel like, why is he abandoning me? Why won't he pick me over doing wrong to be in
Right.
prison? So I can certainly
Absolutely.
understand that feeling.
Right. And even as an adult, it was hard for me for a very long time to understand and comprehend that until that day when he wanted to stay he gave me my keys. He walked me to my car. Look, like a daddy would.
Like a daddy's supposed to.
But he told me he wanted to stay.
Wow. Did he look sad, or did he look like, like?
I think he
was-
looked disappointed that I saw him in that state.
Yes.
He was disappointed that I saw him in that state.
What was so he was incarcerated and got out. How much time had he done up to that point? Was it like his first stint?
Oh no. The funny thing is, he never committed a new crime. He just always violated.
Yeah.
And the violation was because of the drug use. And so I think if the prison system had have dealt with the drug use and would have rehabilitated him, then we probably would have had a different outcome. But he had probably, up until that point, probably had already done about 25 years maybe.
So he got a big sentence up front. Is that why he kept?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, he got a large sentence up front.
Just for being a drug user?
He was,
Or
and he
for robbery?
it was robbery.
Okay.
Right, it was robbery, but at the root of it, it was the addiction.
About the money, about the addiction.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Wow. Is he still with us today?
No, actually, he died in 2006.
How old were you then?
Oh gosh, I'm 51, so
Approximately.
probably
In your 30s?
I was in my 30s.
30s?
I was in my 30s because my youngest son was born November the 15th of 2005. And he looked exactly like my dad. And the very first thing I said to myself is, my dad is about to die. And he died in March of the following year. Because he had contracted hepatocellular carcinoma, which was a result of the IV drug use, the heroin drug use from years earlier. So.
That's some kind of cancer?
Right, yes.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, right.
That's the medical term.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
had contracted cancer as a result of hepatitis, as a result of the IV drug use.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you have a mom?
Yes, my mom and I, we were both raised by my great-grandparents.
I see.
So my mom was 15
I see.
when she had me.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So
Yeah.
you were raised by the same people. I got it.
Absolutely.
Well, you've done marvelously. So I understand by that background making you want to be involved with incarcerated people. Well, how did you get to the warden though? How did the journey lead you there?
So we were having a volunteer orientation at my mother's church because my mother's a pastor, and she had a prison ministry. So we needed to do a volunteer orientation. So Warden Pittman came to the orientation, and April the 11th, 2015 was the day that we met. And it is so amazing because everything that I wanted in a dad, he is that.
Wow.
He is my best friend. We talk every day.
Wow.
And the irony of it is my biological father spent 30 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, cycling in and out. And my bonus dad spent 30 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, but he went from being a correction officer to a senior warden.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an irony.
Yes.
With those parallel but so close together backgrounds.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the funny thing too though is my bonus dad, his father, he met my grandfather, which was his dad, when he was 35, when he was a major in TDCJ. And he was walking the halls and someone said, "There's a man here who says you're his dad." And he went down, and that was my grandfather, Arthur Pittman. He had never met him before.
But it was your real...
My bonus dad's father. So we both have been impacted by incarceration.
So his father was in prison too?
Yes, his father.
Why he was in
Did he know it?
No, He
Who did he think his father was?
well, he knew his name, but he had never met him before.
I see.
And when my grandfather, his dad, found out that he was the major on the unit, he was, telling everybody, my son is the major here. And he called him. They told him, and he went down to the cell block where he was, and it was him.
Wow.
That was his first time meeting him?
His first time meeting him at 35. His very first time meeting him.
What was the relationship like after that?
Oh, he loved him. And that's one of the things that I try to explain to family members. The incarceration is the thing that separates the families, but the incarceration don't necessarily separate the love. Because my dad, although he had just met him at 35, he still loved him. And my dad, although he had an addiction, was going in and out of prison, he was still my dad. I just wanted him to be my dad. And so when people allow incarceration to separate them from the child, you're actually doing a disservice a lot of times. And I think it's important that's why it's important to have those conversations with the children, because you think I'm not going to take my kid to the prison. I'm not going to let them see them like that, when you're actually probably doing more harm, because that's what happened to me. And so when my father would get out of prison, because they wouldn't allow me to have the relationship, I held on really tight. And no one really talked to me about the incarceration, his addiction, what did that mean for me in my life. I didn't know how to navigate that space, because I thought I was the only one of my friends who had an incarcerated parent, when there's a bunch of us.
Yes.
Yeah, they say it's 2.7 million of us.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So once you saw your dad at 9, you weren't able to go see him anymore?
I think I saw him again when I was about 18.
Okay.
And actually, when I saw him, he was coming out of prison, and I told him he could come and stay with me, because I was living on my own.
At 18?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Because my great-grandmother had already passed. Both of my great-grandparents were already deceased. And that's how much I wanted that relationship. And he did well for a while, because he really wanted to, I think, stay sober. But I think he wanted it more for me, but instead of really wanting it for himself, because there were so many layers that still needed to be uncovered and peeled away. And he just couldn't. I think, and this is the one thing I think that I want a lot of family members to know, that sometimes you put more pressure on them by having unrealistic expectations. Be present, support them, but support them in the best way that you can, and maybe get resources or ask other people how you can support them. But a lot of times I think I put a lot of pressure on my dad that he couldn't handle, that he couldn't manage.
That's what I was going to ask too. What was the trigger? Was it that the pressure from the family, or was it him wanting to go and satisfy his needs?
I think it was probably a combination of both. With him wanting to satisfy satisfy the addiction, but also my dad was a very giving person, and although he was in his addiction, he was one of the people in his family that they looked up to. So he had a lot on his shoulder, because his mother she was already deceased, and so was his father.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So do you find now that there are more organizations to help children like you?
Absolutely. I think now people realize the collateral damage and consequences of having an incarcerated parent. So I think there are a lot more organizations. There probably should need to be more, but we have a lot of great ones here in Harris County. But I think people are realizing that if you want to break the generational cycle of incarceration, you can't just start with the person that's incarcerated. You have to start with the family members. And go into the schools, mentor the kids, give them the resources they need, help the families and the support system. Because if the mother is trying to support the incarcerated loved one, support the kid, because a lot of times that's an income that has been lost when the parent is incarcerated. And so those children are a lot of times raising themselves or being raised by the streets. And not because the other parent or the custodial parent is not a good parent, they're just trying to survive and meet the needs. And so the kids get lost. And because there isn't anyone else there, they just fall into the streets, into their peers. So there are a lot more organizations, and they're doing a great job.
Wow. Now, how do you think that a child would do if you come into their schools? When you say go into the schools, it seems like to me they would be embarrassed or wouldn't want you to know. I don't know what the dynamic is. It's been a long time since I've been in school, so I don't really know what the dynamic is for schools. But how do you go into the school to deal with a child of a parent that's incarcerated?
I think just having the after-school mentorship programs,
after-school
creating a space for the children. And a lot of times when you create those spaces, those children will come. For me, I created a whole narrative in my head. So for a long time, everybody thought my father was in Afghanistan.
Oh my God.
Yes. And because that was easier. That took
So
away
you
the
told
shame.
that story?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I told it. It had gotten to the point where I was telling it flawlessly.
Oh.
Because of so much shame. I felt like people would look at me differently. And I thought I was the only one who was dealing with it. But I think when you create after-school programs, and a lot of times the children, they'll come because they need a space. And then once you get them in the after-school program, they begin to trust you, and then they begin to reveal certain things to you and talk to you. So now you know how to support them and their families.
We recently went back to Worthing, and Marilyn Gambrell, have you ever heard of her?
No.
Marilyn Gambrell has a...
Is that the Gambrell, the guy that's on TV?
No, it's a lady.
A lady.
Yeah, so
It's
she
not his
actually has
wife?
kids. No, it's not his wife. So she has a program for kids of incarcerated parents at the high schools.
Right.
And it's 30 years. So when I was in prison, she actually brought the kids to the prison. And they were angry and they cussed us out saying their fathers and mothers were incarcerated. And one girl who came in, and she was 13, I met her when I got out. And still know her to this day. But we actually just came from Worthing High School, and the question was asked, how many of you guys have incarcerated parents? And it was mainly the football, basketball team, and they raised their hands.
Wow.
And then afterwards, they came and talked to us, and they had conversations with some of us who expressed that we were incarcerated, and we did our best to apologize for their parents being incarcerated, and we extended our mentorship to them. So these days, for whatever reason, they're more open to talk about it publicly, yes, among their peers, because now I think that their peers know, hey, I have incarcerated parents too, so I can support you, let's support each other.
Awesome. Awesome. TDCJ actually has through the Wyndham School District, they have a family literacy program, which BCMA actually provides the mentorship component, where it is an amazing program where the guys who are in the program actually are really an active part of their child's life. They help them with homework via Zoom. They participate in the parent-teacher conferences. I go in the first Friday of the month, and we talk about communicating, co-parenting, things.
Now, do you do this? You drive to Huntsville?
No.
Or you do it by Zoom or something?
No, I go on the Stringfellow unit, which is in Rocheron, Texas. And so I drive there, and we're actually sitting in the classroom. We talk about how they can communicate with the co-parent, to how to co-parent from where they are. And the value that they
But you're
bring.
teaching the guys incarcerated how to do this.
Yes, ma'am.
But the kids aren't there at this time.
No, they're not there.
You're just giving them the tools and the skills
Right.
to deal with their children.
Right. And they co-parent via Zoom. And of course, they can call them now as well, but they talk to the teachers, they help with homework, they read them stories, and then they're able to talk to them. One guy, when I went in 2 months ago, I think he was able, because of this program, he was able to communicate with his son a lot more frequently. And his son was contemplating suicide. And so because he was able to talk to his dad was able to communicate that to the mother. So they were working together. Even though the mother was out here and he was incarcerated, they were still working together to help their son.
No, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, I was talking to a local personality, music personality, and he wanted to do something like Scared Straight again, but make it more current, to try to encourage kids not to go down that path. What do y'all think about that? I told him I could kind of help him with it, but I don't know what's out there now. Do they still do Scared Straight? Did it help back then? He wants to actually take them to the Harris County Jail and to some of the prisons and kind of just throw it in their face,
I think it's effective for some kids, but these days there's so much information out there. The kids aren't frightened by anything because they know that you can't touch them, and they know there's a possibility they could get off. So they look at a lot of stuff like that, but it has to be to where long-term relationships are being built. If they don't have a long-term relationship with whoever that mentor is, that person, then it's not gonna be as effective as you want, because if you're trying to impact at a moment, that moment tends to be fleeting for that child because there's so much information coming to that child. So tomorrow I'm actually picking up my mentee, and we've been around each other for 3 or 4 months now. And so you have to be able to spend time with them. You have to know the parents, the guardian, whoever the guardian is. You have to extend, if they're on probation, you have to extend yourself to that probation officer. So you're spending 10 hours, just realistically 10, 15 hours a week outside of what you do.
That's a lot.
And that's a lot. So it has to be that mentorship component, or if you can do group, if there's some sort of group that you can get together, that way you can affect 10 or 15 youth. So
With
it has
that
to be
10 hours, yeah.
Exactly.
So
you
it
have to
sounds
start
like the
with that.
best way to do it would be the after-school programs
Yes.
where you can get kids together and bring the resources to them.
Absolutely.
And the mentors to them.
Exactly.
The mentors to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's hard to do it every day, and they probably need something more consistent. It's hard. I couldn't volunteer every day. You know what I mean? You just can't do that. But I'm sure. I don't know. I mean, it's a big problem, but we
Yeah.
do need to try to figure a way through it. You know.
Absolutely.
If it could be a part of the schools, if it could be a part of, let's say, because we're in Houston, HISD, if HISD had that program and they funded it themselves, because we're talking about that with the time and the money, but if they could do stuff like that, then they could get results in-house.
Right.
Because a lot of times they're trying to have you come and volunteer or have organization and pay that organization, but if they could come up with some sort of solution and partner and learn from agencies, get your information and get like LaKeidra's information. That's what needs to happen, because it has to be a comprehensive program, not something for the moment, because it's not going to work like that. Because these kids are going back to their community, back to their houses where the issues are starting at.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the other concerns I have in the community are the kids who age out of foster care, because a lot of them have been affected by the criminal justice system. Their parents either abuse them or abuse them because of the drug use, or still they're being touched by the criminal justice system. So that's the scariest population, at least when you have a grandparent, a great-grandparent looking out for you. Although you might not be able to be their main priority, they are going to make sure you're healthy and clean and things like that, which don't seem like enough when you need the love of your parent, but it's better than being with people who don't care about you at all, who have no relationship with you, and that's getting a check for you that when you turn 18, they're not going to get that check anymore, and you think they loved you, and now you're out in the street. I mean, that's got to be the coldest to me of all, and that's a population that I worry about.
Why do you say it's the scariest population?
Because I guess in my 30 years in the criminal justice system, I've seen those kids, like, since I'm older than you guys, I'm used to saying, my age group is used to saying, fall back on your home training. You don't have no home training. Or they're not acting like they have home training, where these kids really don't have home training. You know what I mean? So you can't even relate to them in the same way that you can relate to my generation. Your generation, your father being incarcerated. I didn't grow up in that type of generation where people were incarcerated. We were poor. We had poor little communities, but there were, fathers and mothers, and although the guys might have had a lot of problems, the men might have beat the women or drank too much, or, with those other kind of dynamics, it wasn't, you still were basically raised with religious basic principles that people got away from. There was a standard of living, a standard of ethics, a code of ethics that people tried to aspire to achieve, even though you might have gone off on the deep end or, done little bad things, but you still tried to go, you knew right from wrong, basically. But I realized that doesn't work so much now, because there have been generations now that don't know right from wrong. They haven't been raised by people who were true mentors, who went to church and taught them the right things, even though they chose to do something wrong. They might be living with people who's doing more dope than they are. Help teaching them how to sell dope, teaching them the wrong thing. So, I don't know. It's just so many types of people I've run into in criminal law, but the scariest ones are the ones who have no place to go, who age out of foster care and they have no place to go.
Yeah, because they're operating in survival mode.
Exactly.
And one thing, a desperate man is a very dangerous man.
It's a very dangerous person. That's what's scary about him.
Absolutely.
And I've had my young clients tell me, I took from him because I needed it more than he did. You know, I mean, somebody's judging, and you know, I've had to tell them that might have been the last they had. You don't know what people are going through. That might be all the money they have to feed their whole family for the week that you just stole. You know what I mean? Because there were a lot of young men who were stealing from Hispanic men on Fridays, shooting them, killing them, saying I needed it more than they did. But you don't know their circumstance. But that's what scary, dangerous situations can happen. And, you know, I'm going to size you up and decide I need it more than you. They don't know anything about insurance on a car or being upside down in a car, about taking your stuff. They don't know anything about that because they haven't been taught that part of life. So they really think that they're not hurting you so much. And they don't realize that that might devastate a person for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
So it's just, I worry about that population.
Yeah.
So. But, you know, we can't solve every problem, right?
No.
You can just try to talk about it and think about it and hope you can do better. So let's talk more about the scholarship. So we had that first scholarship recipient of the murder victim, which is that was a great thing to do.
Yes.
Tell me more about the scholarships.
So we have our scholarship is given every semester. So as long as you have a 2.0 GPA, as long as you are actively enrolled, so you have to prove that you're enrolled, and your parent has to be incarcerated or you're the victim of the crime, your parent or your grandparent. The one thing that we require the scholarship recipients have to give back, they have to pay it forward. So they go out with us, they do community service, they talk to some of the guys that are on the inside to let them know how the incarceration has impacted them. Although, because some of the men or women don't have any communication with their child and they don't know how to, they want to reconcile it, but they can't. So they'll go in and they'll just talk to them about it, about what that process was like for them. So it's everybody, we have a lot of churches that support the scholarship. A lot of the guys still give, even once they are released, they still pour back into the scholarship fund. And the one thing, our second scholarship recipient, she just got her master's degree from Prairie View.
Oh, great.
She graduated from Texas A&M and she got a master's from Prairie View. And so even if they want to get a certificate, they don't have to go to a 4-year degree. They can get a certification. As long as they are getting some form of education, we're there to support them. And one of the things we also realized is that because my dad was from a single parent home, his dad was incarcerated. So now what we just started this year is the Benny Pittman Bell Correctional Officer Scholarship Fund. So now we will sponsor a scholarship for a correctional officer who is a single parent, who is going back to school, and who currently works for TDCJ to help them better their lives as well.
Great, great. So do you ever do any programs at Dayton with the women's unit?
Oh, absolutely. We've done probably 2 or 3 programs there, and I just love actually going in with the women.
Tell me about that. Tell me about the female program.
Well, one of the things we do, we go in and we talk to them about doing resume building, soft skills, because to be very honest, there aren't as many programs for women as there are for men. So a lot of the outside programs go in and they provide as many resources for the women as they possibly can. So we go in and we teach them resume building, interviewing skills. We do business competitions, where we did one at Lockhart Prison, where we actually helped them put together a business plan. We brought in judges so they could judge their plan, and so to help them implement it. And we connect with them so when they get out, we can help them implement the plan. A lot of the women have lost their children, so a lot of them are really concerned about reconnecting with their child when they get out. So we try to connect them with the families before they get out, if that is an option, and to help them rebuild those relationships. The women, again, they don't have as much support. So
I didn't think so.
So we need organizations to go in and to support them. TDCJ, actually, to be very honest, they're doing a better job than they have in the past by providing more education for the women and more resources. But a lot of times the women come out and they go back to the same environment that actually put them in prison because there aren't very many resources.
Why aren't there very many resources?
I think the reason why originally is because most of the people in prison were men. So, you know, there weren't many women in prison, and so it was mostly men. So I think it was always geared toward the men to get them out so they could be productive and work and take care of their children, because they've left women out there taking care of the children in the free world. But now, with the crack era And now this younger generation, it's more women doing robberies and things that were traditionally male crimes. You know, women are doing them now. And the drug scene sent a lot of women to prison.
Absolutely. And the women prisons, to be very honest, some of them are more dangerous than the men prison. Because women, they have a lot of emotional things going on, so they are very dangerous.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the women prisons, a lot of the women prisons are a lot more dangerous. They're very aggressive, and they don't have as many outlets as the men. And to be very honest, they don't have the skills to communicate and to kind of help de-escalate situations. So those are also, peer educators are going in helping them with those skills as well, because they want to make sure that the assaults in the women prison decrease.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that they were more dangerous. I'd always heard that they were more loving and caring towards each other. That's what I'd always
Some
heard.
of them are, but
They get more maternal.
But they're as the population of women in prison increase, the danger they're becoming more aggressive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a big gang population with women too?
Not the gang population is not as big with women. It's just that because there's so many women that are going in because of drugs and things, they are becoming just more aggressive. Yeah, they're becoming more aggressive.
So do y'all have problems fundraising with your organization, or is it, I mean, I know you said it's funded by people in their commissary, but I mean, there could always be more. So what do y'all do in those?
Oh, like this year we're having a gala, and one of the things we do, we go out and we talk to the churches. We talk to the community. We, let them know that this is a service that we provide, and the people that are incarcerated, they will be released one day. So we want you to invest in making sure that they come back to the community better than they were when they went in. So we go to churches, we go to schools. My dad actually lives in Bryan, so we actually talk to a lot of the people at Texas A&M, and they really invest as well. So we just, individual donors, kind of like the Obama campaign, individual donors, and we talk to the people and let them know that this is something for a cause that you can believe in, and it will benefit your community overall. Even though you may not have someone directly impacted by incarceration, believe me, there's somebody whether it's on your job or your church, that is impacted, and so you will be helping that population.
Wow, that's important. So Damion, what do you want to add to this conversation today?
I just think that the work that's being done is about data. I've kind of gotten into this data mode, that the numbers tell the story. So because you're able to get the kids and get the men and women to be a part of this process, you're able to gather data that can also tell the story of why they came to prison. And then with the kids, okay, what works for the kids? Is it education? Is it certificates? Is it just being around other family members? So getting that data and then putting that data back out there, so now we have some sort of solution, or we have a way to the solution, because that's what has to happen. You can do the work that you do, and you guys are on different ends of the spectrum, but if the data that you see can be able to affect the data that you see and maybe come together and find out what that median is, and then now we have the solutions, because I think it's about the solutions, because we're part of these systems, but we actually care on how we can affect these systems. And the main thing is that the kids are going through these systems. And so there continue to be this pipeline, as we always say. But if there's some sort of way where we can squeeze it off and say, okay, kids, this is what you're going to do. I believe sometimes you gotta just do it. Like, I don't need you to come and say what you want to do. This is what you're going to do over here. And then you can start making decisions when you get to this particular point. But let's go through this. So I think it's the data that eventually will be able to tell the story and present solutions, or present ways to work towards solutions for those systematically impacted children.
I agree. I definitely agree. I think the data is also important, because you have to have that baseline to know how to serve and who to serve and where the trends are and what you need to do to impact those individuals. So I agree with you totally.
So who keeps the data for your organization?
I do.
Yeah.
I keep the data. I do the interviewing. I go out and get the funding. My dad and I, we do a lot of it with a lot of our volunteers. But yeah, I keep the data because it's very important. And I want the donors to see that the donations that they're giving, that their money is making a difference in the lives of the people that we serve. And so a lot of times we go back to the churches that have given us funding, and we take the individuals that we've assisted with us, and they tell them thank you. We've taken a guy who we met in prison who told us he was racist, he was a gangbanger, and he went in prison at 19. He was released at 43. And now, every time he sees me, I'm his sister. But the funds that we were able to get from those churches, we were able to go in and be able to mentor him and help change his mind about things. And now he is married, he has a family, and he's doing very well.
Wow, after all those years in prison.
After all of those years. I tell people all the time, mental health is important because you can't stand in the rain and not get wet. So if you're in prison more than a few days, I think you need a support system that you can come out to and that can help you. It's because post-incarceration syndrome is real. And so those are numbers that we keep as well. People who will call me and say, I can't do it, I want to go back. They want to go back to prison because they just can't survive out here in the real world because their family have unrealistic expectations, because they operated in a system that worked for them for so long, and now they can't make it out here. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Are there places they can live on the outside that are similar to prison? Like, I mean, I know they don't have dormitories for people outside of prison.
Halfway houses.
Halfway-
Yeah, halfway houses.
But are they independent halfway houses?
Most of them are. And
Sober houses I hear about a lot.
That's more so for the individual that's trying to detox
Yes.
or whatever. Yeah, sober houses. But the halfway. So I was released to a halfway. I don't know if I ever told you. I was released to a halfway house because my parents my mother passed away, grandparents passed away. So I actually was paroled into San Antonio. And then my grandmother passed away in San Antonio, so I went to a halfway house in 3rd Ward. And it was too much like prison. So I see what you're saying. So I can attest to that. It was too much like prison. I actually...
Tell me about it. What was like prison?
So the story I always tell is that my aunt came to see me. She worked for the military and retired, and she's this, we won't call her bougie, but she is who she is, right? And so when she came to see me with my niece, who was like 14, she said, Damion, I want to go to the restroom. And then I was the guy, because I was going to college, that they treated me a little bit different at the halfway house, right? I had some plans. So I had my own room. Everybody didn't have their own room. And so I went to my room and I grabbed the toilet paper for my aunt, because there was no toilet paper in the bathroom, because in prison, toilet paper is a prized possession.
Yeah.
So I'm out and I'm still keeping my toilet paper in the room. And so I gave her the toilet paper, and she came back and sat down. True story. She came back and sat down, and in my head, I say, why she didn't bring me the toilet paper? And I say, Aunt Amy, Marva, I say, where's the toilet paper at? She says, in the bathroom. I got up, went and got the toilet paper and put it back in my room. And then she had to go again. She said, Damion, can I get a toilet paper? But when I got my own apartment, 8 months later or so, I got my own apartment. She came and I said, how do you like it? She said, I don't have to ask for the toilet paper. So yeah, so the transition is way more than just the job. It's way more than just getting back with the family and relationships. I mean, there are things that men and women have to shake. Mm-hmm. Like when you come out of that place, however long you spent, I mean, there are things that you literally have to shake that became normal to you. And now this is your actual norm, and other people can't understand it. And you can't even understand it, you know, because this is not only your survival, this is your protection of yourself, this is your daily activities, and you're saying shake it after however long. It's very difficult sometimes. If you don't have men like me who went through it, or the men that taught me how to go through it myself.
So how long were you in the halfway house?
A year. I was on a GPS monitor for 2 years, and I was going to U of H full time, and they said that initially with a parole board said that was full-time school. And when I came up for release off the GPS monitor, they said, no, you have to go to work too. And I almost lost it. That would have been my first time like losing it. So I was walking down the street in 3rd Ward and saw this place on Cleburne, and I got the number and I called him and said, hey man, can I get an apartment? But what's ironic, there was a man before I was released, and I had a business plan. I showed him the business plan. And he said, Damion, great business plan, but where's your life plan? And it's a letter, and I'll show it to you one day. And he wrote a letter back to me. Damion, great business plan, but what about your life plan? You never got an apartment in your name. You never paid bills. You never did this. And that was true. Because now I got to find I never made a deposit.
Right. You were a child when you went to prison.
Yeah.
So I moved in that apartment, and I had $11 in my pocket after I paid everything. I'm just like, man, I got to get out of this halfway house.
You had to get out of that halfway house.
Because they cook chicken every day, too.
Chicken is a commodity, though, in prison.
Yeah.
Sounds good. That sounds
every
good.
day.
Yeah, sounds good. But it does seem like it's important, though, to have the halfway house where you can transition out.
It is.
You know, because you're now, you know, with your aunt experience, you got to learn that this is not completely normal.
Yeah.
I'm going to still do this because I don't want anybody taking my toilet paper. But when I have my own place, it is normal to keep it in the restroom where, you know, where it goes. So it seems like some rules are necessary.
Yes.
Very.
No, very necessary.
That are similar to the rules in prison, but relaxing it, like you can go to school on your own, you can do different things. So
you got to transition out.
now, this halfway house on Cleburne, was it paid for by TDC or how was it funded?
I was, in all honesty, I was coming from caravans, and I was the person who was like gonna go to school. They knew, and they treated me a little bit different. So somebody paid my rent initially until I got a job. My first job was H&R Block, but somebody paid it for a few months.
I mean, what do you mean somebody like a relative?
I don't remember. I think even some of the guys that I was incarcerated with when I came out, because I met people when I was 19, 20, and when I came home at 33, like they were there for me. So some of those individuals pitched in, some of my aunties and uncles pitched in, they bought me computers and everything. So my transition was a little bit different because people, for whatever reason, they saw success in me. And I had never been in and out, you know, so I was a little bit different. And people saw it, and they just really kind of invested hard in me, and not just family, like men that I was incarcerated with. Actually came, picked me up, took me to job interviews, my driver's license. They came when I took my driver's license. Somebody I was incarcerated with brought his mother's car, took me to, let me drive, because I hadn't drove in 17 years. Let me drive, let me parallel park, took me up there, sat with me while I did the driver's license test, and then took me back home. Yeah, so it has to be that transition. So I would ask you that question too. What are some of the biggest things that you see people need to do in their transition?
I think one of the biggest things is mental health assessment. They need to be able to talk to somebody about the process, what some of their fears, the things that they've experienced, and just some of the things that happened pre-incarceration that maybe even led them to the incarceration. Because a lot of times, people, when you talk about mental health, the first thing they'll say is, I'm not crazy.
Right.
And they don't want the stigma that goes along with it. But you have to have a mental health assessment. I have family members who call me frustrated because he won't sleep in the bed, he sleeps on the floor. And I have to explain to them, he slept on wire for 30 years. The bed is uncomfortable. And I know you're excited you made this room, this beautiful space, but sleeping on the floor is more comfortable for him. So allow him that space to gradually transition to the bed. They could have a huge room and they will sleep or live in a corner of the room. They won't live outside of that corner because they've been adjusted to living in such a small space. And so the family gets really upset about that. So that's why I think the mental health is really important, because they need to learn how to transition from that. And I think that's why it's really important that organizations, it's more than just going in and having, like prison ministries go in and they have church. It's more than going and having a service. You really need to have processes in place where you are willing to walk with them, where you're willing to give them a mentor, where you're willing to walk with the families. Because we do things like we pay rent, we pick them up, take them to job interviews. I call Damion, if I can't do it, he'll do it for me. But you have to be willing to go on the journey with them, because anything can trigger them. I've had men in the store and somebody is standing behind them and it triggers them because they think in the commissary line, if you get in the commissary line, that's a big deal and you don't want anybody skipping the line. So they trigger because somebody's behind them too close. So I've had people call me because their family members had a breakdown in the store because they thought they were trying to skip the commissary line. And they reach out to the prison ministry that went in and laid hands, but they can't provide them with any services. So it is very important that the organizations realize that even if you can't provide the service, find someone who can and help walk them through it.
Yes, that's true.
Well, we're getting, believe it or not, toward the end of our journey tonight. It's been a great ride. What do you want people to know about breaking chains and making amends?
That we are an organization that believe that generational incarceration can be broken if you just believe in the system, that if you make sure that you are connected to someone. And if you're connected to, it doesn't have to be BCMA, but just connect to an organization and stay connected and so into that organization, because it definitely takes money and time and resources to do the work that we do.
And Damion, I know you participate in a lot of organizations. I don't know how you do it. New wife, school, work, organizations, but it's good to stay busy. You're still a young man. I want you to look at the audience too and just tell people what you've learned about these organizations and what you'd like people to know to help their family members who are about to be released from prison.
I echo LaKeidra's sentiments. There has to be organizations that are willing to walk with you throughout that entire process. And that entire process, for some, may be 5 years, it may be 5 months. So you have to be committed to the process. It's not about having a template to put everybody inside that template that comes out of incarceration or that really makes up their mind. They may have never been incarcerated, but they've made up their mind while they're in society to change. So you can't put people inside of this template because their issues weren't template issues, and so the solutions aren't going to be template solutions. So making sure that you reach out to those organizations who have invested the time, the money, those individuals who may have experienced it, bringing them in to offer advice. And I always talk about making sure that the people who you work with, sometimes funding matters. If you can fund an organization or if you can hire somebody and train them up inside of your organization for what you want, to do the research, to make the connections, that's something that you should do if you want to do this work in-house.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting the cue to start wrapping up. So thank you so much for our welcome back after 3 years.
Yes.
I'm so excited about breaking chains, making amends, learning about this organization, and thank you for sharing your story and your journey. Thank you for always being there for those people who have been affected by the criminal justice system like yourself and those that you're trying to mentor. Thank you so much for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King, where we educate you about the criminal justice system. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something